Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Once again, at this point, it's our tradition to go around and introduce ourselves. I suggest that we pause for a brief period before we say our names. There will be a quiz at the end. My name is Oswald.
I'm Tim. My name is Michael.
My name is Greg.
I'm Kay.
I'm Jim.
I'm Pat.
Don. My name is Tom.
My name is Jerry.
I'm AJ.
My name is Brian.
Jeff. My name is Clint.
Ron.
Jack.
My name is Kat.
And David.
I'm Brad.
And Joe. Anybody else?
Grisha.
Michael.
I am Al.
Donald. My name is Mark.
Okay, well, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Ryuko Laura Burges. She's a lay and trusted Buddhist teacher in the SotoZen tradition. She lectures and leads retreats at different practice centers in Northern California. She's been a teacher of children for 30 years and trains other teachers to bring mindfulness practice into the elementary classroom. Laura co-founded the Sangha in Recovery program at the Zen Center and has a particular interest in the intersection of Buddhism and recovery. She's the abiding teacher of the Lenox House Meditation Group in Oakland. So, welcome, Laura.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura. Very nice to be back. Thank you for inviting me. I was here a few months ago, and I really enjoyed the warm-hearted intimacy of your Sangha, so thank you for having me back. Today I'd like to talk about the 5 hindrances in Buddhism, but I'd like to do that through the window of Greek mythology and talk a little bit about Pandora's box. And in the mythology, it's actually a jar, kind of a ceramic jar. So the story is that Prometheus angered Zeus by stealing fire from him and playing some other pranks on him. So Zeus decided to get back at Prometheus by sending all the ills to the world that we know of today. So hatred and violence and hypocrisy and sloth and greed, hate, and delusion. So he called upon Hephaestus to create a beautiful woman. We always get the bad rap, right? Just like Eve. And fashioned her out of white and black marble, and in the image of Aphrodite, the goddess of love. And so Aphrodite covered her with jewels, and she had lips like rubies and eyes like sapphires. And Athena decked her out in beautiful garments. So she came down to Earth, and she was married to gotta look at my notes. She was married to, I never can say this name without reading it, Epimetheus, who lived among the mortals. And people came from far and wide to gaze on Pandora's beauty. But this ceramic jar that Zeus had given to Pandora was full of all these ills, and he also instilled in her an insatiable curiosity. So she came down and married Epimetheus, and mortals came from far and wide to gaze at her, and of course, predictably, she finally had to open that jar, and out came all these evils that we know today, which had until that time not been known to humans. And luckily, Pandora quickly clapped the lid back on that jar. She didn't know that Zeus had also included in the jar hope. So at the bottom of the jar there was hope. So just in time to keep hope alive, she clapped the lid on that jar. And so I think this is a kind of metaphor for how, although we all suffer from these various ills, which I'll go into from a Buddhist point of view, there's also hope that we can progress along the path of moving in a more wholesome direction. So in Buddhism, the 5 hindrances are greed, and included in that is sensual desire, and then anger, also characterized as ill will, antipathy, prejudice, resentment, laziness, sloth, torpor, worry, and doubt. So greed, anger, laziness, worry, and doubt are these 5 hindrances. You know, and it's very refreshing to me that in Buddhism these aren't considered sins, you know, or if you indulge in these, you're a bad person. They're called hindrances because they are obstacles to our happiness and ease. And in Buddhist thought, you know, we can cultivate a wider point of view and a bigger heart so that we're not afflicted by these hindrances to the degree most of us can be. So I'd like to touch on each of these aspects by way of introduction as we look at these things today. And Buddha said, I teach about suffering and about an end to suffering. And he felt that if we could move in a happier and more wholesome direction, we would decrease the suffering, not only to ourselves but to other beings. And the thing about these hindrances is that, you know, in Buddhism we don't always keep in mind that whatever we do to other people, we're also doing to ourselves. So I love this quote by Pema Chodron that holding a grudge is like eating rat poison and expecting the rat to die. You know, so if we carry these resentments and hatreds around with us, they eat away at us. They really don't do that much to the other person. So that's why I love this teaching of Buddha that, you know, what is the end of suffering? It's greater happiness and ease. So recognizing in Buddhism we have a radical dharmic freedom to cast off this ignorance and live as free people. This is the wonderful teaching of Buddhism, that freedom is possible for us as human beings. And this is a wonderful quote about Buddhism. The unshakable deliverance of the mind is the highest goal in Buddhist doctrine. The unshakable deliverance of the mind is the highest goal in Buddhist doctrine. The freeing of the mind from all limitations, fetters, and bonds that tie us to the wheel of suffering. The removing of all obstacles that bar its progress. So this is where these 5 hindrances crop up and get in the way of our greater happiness. So sensual desire or greed, so much of our life is conducted in the realm of the 5 senses, and they're there to serve us and delight us, to connect us with other beings, and to instill in us a love of the interconnectedness of everything. You know, when we walk through Muir Woods and feel that cathedral-like beauty of those trees and feel we're part of that, this is the 5 senses at our fingertips, enlivening and opening a whole world to us. And, you know, each of the senses overlap with the others, yet each is unique and discrete. And these 5 senses also get us into trouble if we overindulge in them to the point of addiction or self-destruction or harm to others. So I'd like to do a guided meditation with you right now, if you'll assume the position. And with your eyes closed or downcast, whatever your particular meditation stance is, just open our ears for a few moments to listening. And now in your mind's eye, take yourself to a beautiful place that you love to go in nature. I was at Muir Woods recently, so that image came to my mind. Whether it's a waterfall or the ocean or the banks of a river, bring that scene to mind in your mind's eye. And the great gift of imagination is we can go to this place whenever we need solace or refuge. And now bring to mind a favorite taste of food, whether it's fresh fruit or delicious meal prepared with friends. And now remember a time when touching was an expansive and ecstatic experience for you. And finally, there may not be another sense more evocative to us than the memory of certain smells. Sometimes just by smelling a certain flower or herb, we're cast back to another time in our life. So now take a deep breath, and we'll return to the room. One of the things I love about the five senses is that in a very vivid and real sense, our five senses remind us of our deep interconnection with one another. So right now, as I look at you, your faces are in my eyes and in my brain. And my words are coming into your ears and touching different memories and parts of you. So this is a very vivid and real way in which we're interconnected with one another. But, we can also dip down with our five senses into a kind of insatiability of need, as though our senses hook onto things and always leave us wanting more. I remember hearing the phrase, "One is too many and 1,000 is not enough." And I heard that before I ever took a drink. But for me, the insatiability has been proven to me through my adventures with alcohol. And I'm very happy to say that through practice and recovery, I recently celebrated 30 years of sobriety. And I found in these years that Buddhism and recovery together have given me a wonderful foundation with which to confront the joys and sorrows of the world. So 1 is too many and 1,000 is not enough. And maybe you know what that means as well. But, this is taking refuge in the idea that if something, as my brother-in-law like to say, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. So that if a little bit is good, then more and more and more will be better. Or as Mae West said, too much of a good thing is wonderful. So, some of us who've literally had addictions find that we have a euphoric experience through drugs or alcohol, and then we embark on the path of trying to recreate that moment over and over again through substances, behaviors, or other people. But I don't think you need to be an addict to get this idea that of greed, that we reach out and move and lean into things that we want, and we pull away and reject and push away things that we don't want. And in Buddhism, even when we take this posture, we're sitting upright, neither leaning to the left nor the right, neither forward or back, with a kind of wonderful equanimity. And I'll talk later about detachment, but I don't think detachment means denying ourselves the pleasures of the world. Not at all, but having healthy boundaries and a healthy understanding and even a sense of humor about how our senses can drag us around, you might say. So can I find a place within myself that's free from the push and pull of always wanting more and never being satisfied, which is just a kind of endearing human quality, this kind of grasping quality we have as humans. And the second hindrance is anger or ill will, resentment, hatred, prejudice, antipathy. And I think this comes from, and the Buddhist teachings say that this comes from identifying too strongly with our own position, with our own preferences, and feeling threatened when that is countered. So a huge part of our identity is what we like and what we don't like, and identifying very strongly with those things. And also the tendency to think, well, we've got the right opinion and the right attitude and the right preferences. It's other people who don't have the right idea about things. And I think this comes from our illusion of being separate or being isolated from other people. Because I can't feel antipathy or hatred for you without it eating away at me, without it blowing back on me. And I might feel like, oh, if I let go of this hatred or this resentment, I'm not being true to myself. If you've been wronged in some way, you can have a very self-righteous kind of grasping of that feeling of being in the right, without noticing that just by loosening up and letting go of it a little bit, you might be able to open yourself once again to pleasure and an open heart, and put aside that anger and resentment, and not let it color your life. I teach third grade, and a lot of my day is reminding children not to let the ups and downs of the day ruin their everyday life, And I like to shake my kids' hands in the morning and just have a moment of connection with them, a little lighthearted moment. And one day I shook this little girl's hand, and I said, "Hi, how are you doing today?" She looked up at me and said, "My life is a barren wasteland." This is an 8-year-old. I don't know where she heard that, but she definitely was applying it to her day that day. So, but if we go around thinking our life is a barren wasteland, we're not going to be open to other possibilities. Right? So, I think it's helpful to think of our anger as hurt and pain and fear, because often if we scrape away at that anger a little bit, sometimes we hold on to a resentment, not because this particular event hurt us so much, but because it triggers an ocean of pain and fear from our past, And there may even been a time in our past where we didn't stand up for ourselves in an appropriate way. And so what we do now is, when that's triggered, we overdo it. We respond way out of proportion to what actually happened. And I think the wonderful thing about sitting practice is that we get to know ourselves in such an intimate way that we can start to recognize what those triggers are and start to make friends with some of these hindrances, as habitual ways of being. So it's so helpful to think of our anger as hurt, pain, and fear, and make friends with that child within us that felt that her life was a barren wasteland. We probably had moments like that without the vocabulary, when we were children. And we can really feel those things deeply and trace them back to their source, instead of getting all caught up in the superficial feeling of anger. And if you grew up in an alcoholic household, or one where there was rage or homophobia or mental illness, that was just the ocean we swam around in. We didn't even recognize it as water. Just like a fish doesn't know what water is till it's taken out of the water. So if you grew up in a sea of anger and unease and prejudice, without even knowing that was what it was, you may have carried those feelings unconsciously into your adult life. And I'm 100% certain that everyone in this room has struggled to look squarely at those things and how they've affected our lives, and try to let them loosen up a little bit, or you wouldn't be practicing, you know. So what is it that tips you into anger? What does anger feel like when it arises? You know, it's a very powerful and sometimes exciting and dramatic emotion, and sometimes we can be a little addicted to anger. So sit with this for a few moments and just think about, you know, what tips you over into anger. And if this is sort of your go-to hindrance, or, you know, the one you tend to manifest in your life, we'll talk about it more during the discussion, but let's just sit with for a moment and see what flashes anger into us. So if getting your own way is your number one priority, anger is very effective, because it makes other people want to give you what you want rather than deal with your anger. But it doesn't lead to love or intimacy. What it leads to is a kind of scorched earth around you where people don't want to deal with you. So anger is we could talk all day about it, actually. Number 3, laziness, procrastination, sloth, torpor. Growing up in the Episcopal Church, I remember hearing St. Paul said, "The things that we ought," he said, "that which I ought not to have done, that I have done, and that which I should have done, that I have not done." So this is kind of it in a nutshell. And often our laziness or procrastination can be fear of failure or fear of success. I know a lot of carpenters, and they talk to me about completion anxiety. This is fascinating to me. They'll get several jobs going at once, and they don't want to finish one. And if you've dealt with a carpenter, you might have noticed this. You know, and this can be part of procrastination. Is just, I don't know what that's about, but you're just not quite wanting to finish up, leaving that door open. And you know, we may chastise ourselves about being lazy, when actually we're exhausted from the expectations and unrealistic goals we've set for ourselves. You know, if we're doing way too much and not doing any of it very effectively, it's not really that we're lazy. It's that we haven't set our priorities and focused our attention on things we can actually complete with a sense of satisfaction. And this can also be related to greed, just taking on too much, where our mind and body may be trying to tell us to just stop, just stop, be in stillness for a moment. And a very helpful mnemonic or mantra about this, if we tend to take on too much and then feel like we're lazy because we're not finishing anything, is just to stop and tell yourself, I am enough, I do enough, I have enough. I am enough, I do enough, I have enough. And this kind of undercuts or undermines that greedy sense of never being satisfied and never feeling that we're quite good enough. So rather than running around driving ourselves crazy, we can seek a kind of patient, steady effort that will serve us over time in a saner way, rather than taking on way too much. 4, my favorite, worry. Let the worry begin. That's my mantra. I'm a mom, I've raised a daughter, and I think part of me, I finally apprehended that, I get it. I feel like if I'm not worrying, then I'm not doing my job, If I'm not worrying, then I don't care enough. But worry, as I heard someone say in an AA meeting, worry has nothing to do with the outcome. And worry doesn't help the outcome at all. And something very tragic happened to someone I love, and he said to me, on reflection, he said, you worry all your life about all these things that never happen. And then something horrible happens that you couldn't possibly have anticipated. So why worry? Maybe a better technique would be to build up our resilience and our compassion so that when we're faced with something really difficult, we can cope with it with some equanimity. And I tell my third graders, and I even tell myself this, notice when you're really worried about something and it doesn't come to pass, pay attention to that and notice that it didn't actually happen. And this can train us not to worry so much about things until it's really time, to worry. So it's probably best not to worry so much that at any given moment you can't also be happy. So I love this quote, you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. That's not Buddha. I got that from Law and Order, but and in a way it's true. But we can't attach our happiness to another person. We can't wait to be happy till everybody we love are okay. So we can reserve a little part of ourselves to worry about others, but it doesn't help them, and it doesn't help us. And another helpful thing with worry is, rather than spinning our wheels and worrying compulsively, to just stop when we notice we're worrying and just say a line from the Metta Sutta, or Loving Kindness Sutra, may all beings be happy, may they be joyous and live in safety. So I'll say that again, and you could repeat it if you care to. May all beings be happy.
May all beings be happy.
May all beings be happy. May they be joyous.
May they be joyous.
And live in safety.
And live in safety.
I'm sorry, I got distracted by an image of my daughter. So this illusion that if I worry enough, I can protect my loved ones from harm. I, as a child, when my parents would go out, this is kind of a weird thing I would do. I would imagine every horrible thing that could happen to them while they were gone. Because I had this kind of magical thinking that if I thought of it, then it couldn't possibly happen. And that gave me a kind of dark predilection for imagining the worst case scenario all the time. So our fifth hindrance is doubt, which is related to worry, of course. And I think we're often assailed by voices in our head asking ourselves, am I on the right track? Is life passing me by? Have I made the right choices? Are my friends really there for me? This is doubt as a form of worry, actually. Doubts about our spiritual community. Doubts about our teachers or our sponsors or our friends. Doubts about the future, and doubts about whether the actions we're taking now will result in a happier and healthier future. Doubt that the things we're doing in our lives will lead to greater security and happiness, or towards negative consequences. So I love this quote by Woody Allen. Mankind is standing at a great crossroads. One path leads to annihilation and despair, the other to total destruction and oblivion. The choice is ours. The pessimist in me kind of loves that. So there are antidotes to these five hindrances, and I've tried to touch on them as I've gone along. But one thing is just to try to abandon our old ideas and watch these hindrances as they arise. Oh, there's my old friend worry. Oh wow, there's doubt again. And really examine them as they come up and feel the taste and the texture of these hindrances, of this old, little shabby hatred that I carry around with me, or this tired little doubt that I could actually let go of now. And to abandon some of these old ideas that we carry around with us and identify with. Maybe we'll know a new freedom and a new happiness if we just let go of some of these kind of stale ideas that we carry around. And a huge thing to abandon, because it isn't true, is our sense of isolation and fear. And think about and appreciate and be grateful for all those people in our lives who are there for us, who have, even though they may have let us down at times, have been there for us through our darkest times. And let go of this sneaking feeling that we're all alone, because we're not. And I think many of us, and I see it evidenced here today, many of us have created Sanghas within Sanghas in our lives. And for some of us it may be that our own families of origin were not that wholesome, were not that supportive to us. And we may love those people in certain ways, and yet have had to find honorary grandparents or honorary brothers and sisters in our lives. And that's such a healthy and wholesome antidote to that sense of disappointment we might have had growing up. So in each case, we have this freedom to turn our attention in the appropriate direction and to notice and understand these hindrances, but then turn our attention in a more wholesome or healthy direction. In the Pali Canon, it notes that we frequently give our unwise attention to these hindrances. We can also ask, what am I getting out of this behavior or this attitude? Why am I nursing this grudge? Why do I continue to worry about this thing I have no control over? So, in terms of greed, when we get that insatiable panic or grasping feeling, a wonderful thing is just to stop and come back to the five senses in this moment and find the present moment as a kind of refuge and healing. One thing that I suggest to people who tend to have panic attacks is to come back to the five senses right now. Panic is often in the brain, in the mind, an anticipated calamity. And often just looking down at your feet on the ground is a relief from a sense of panic. So there's a simple life going on at the center of our stressful and complicated life. And then there's this wonderful Zen koan that in the midst of our busyness, we can tune into a deep part of ourselves that is not busy. And this deep inner witness is a kind of loving, compassionate witness that's with us all the time. And I think we touch this when we sit silently, especially when we sit with other people, because we feel the communion and our collective intention to live a beneficial life. I feel like there are tendrils of our, golden tendrils from our hearts reaching out to one another right now in a kind of healing elixir, you might say. So I really urge you to just stop and turn towards the five senses each day and recognize that sometimes our greed comes from just not paying attention to what's going on right now and not noticing the richness and the variety and the beauty of everything around us at the moment. So let's allow ourselves to be fed and nourished by the five senses, to become more subtle in our appreciation of them so we don't overindulge in ways that ultimately aren't satisfying. In terms of hatred, a wonderful antidote to hatred is cultivating loving kindness for self and others. And I alluded to the Metta Sutta before. May all beings be happy, may they be joyous and live in safety. And we can turn this towards all beings, even those we're not that crazy about. Wish for their greater happiness and ease. And I think one way to do that is, I've grown, I've changed, I've evolved as a person. And so, and I want to continue to grow and change. Can I give credit to other people that they may not be on the same place on the continuum that I'd like them to be, but to give them credit that they too are on a path of growth, even if I can't see or appreciate it. Give other people the benefit of the doubt. And this is a wonderful kind of generosity, a magnanimous feeling that we can offer to other people. The funny thing is when we open up this kind of appreciation or gratitude towards others with all our flaws, we feel better, We feel greater ease and compassion and a little growing joy within us when we open our hearts to other people in that way. So the Metta Sutta says, all living beings, whether weak or strong, in high, middle, or low realms of existence, born or to be born, visible or invisible, may all beings be happy. May they be joyous and live in safety. And so this includes all the beings that came before us, including our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and all the ancestors that stretch back into time that we'll never know. We don't even know what kind of sorrows and difficulties they overcame. We don't even know what kind of karma or difficulty we inherited from them. But we do know that we can do something in our own lives to give ease to those who come after us and to everyone we touch every day in our lives. Laziness. Our prescription in Buddhism is to turn towards right effort. And this just means just doing the next right thing and approaching each activity with a sense of curiosity and vigor, So one way to do that is to rouse our physical energy through exercise, through communion with other people, recognizing that sometimes what we might think of as laziness is really an inner witness encouraging us to slow down and smell the roses, if you will. And Thich Nhat Hanh, he says, when you're having a lazy day, be really, really lazy. And I sometimes think about that. Sometimes I just plan a Sunday where I don't do a darn thing and just, stare out the window and read and nap and just enjoy doing absolutely nothing. And that's the concept of a Sabbath. You could build that into your Sunday here in your Sangha to go out from here and just enjoy the day in a lazy way. And then worry. There's a wonderful quote from Lao Tzu, "Look well to this day, for this is life, the very life of life." So this is the concept of living one day at a time and just living it fully without worrying about the past or making plans for the future, and just fully appreciating and opening ourselves to this day. That's a great antidote to worry. And interestingly, the word remorse means to chew again. So when we feel remorse, we're chewing up again that old chew toy of regret of something that's long gone. And the only thing we can do about that thing in the past is to make a vow to change what we do in the future. I was working on a little conflict between two boys in my class on Friday, and one boy had kind of done something that upset the other boy, and they shook hands. And the boy who'd gotten upset put his arm around the other boy who'd upset him, and he said, "You know what my dad says? He says when you make a mistake, you can learn from it." I just thought that was so cute, this little 8-year-old offering the great wisdom of his father to the other boy. And sometimes we just feel this kind of restlessness, irritability, and discontent with the world. And, when we feel that way, we might just act out in a way that's unbecoming or that we vowed not to act out in. So when we feel that kind of restlessness or discontent, a wonderful thing to do is to just turn our attention towards someone who might need our friendship right then. Somebody that we could reach out to, another suffering being. And just recognize that worry is just like, that hamster on the wheel never getting anywhere. So, doubt. This is one of my favorite quotes from Dogen. Ron, you've heard me say this many times. Dogen was our ancestor in Zen Buddhism, and I first saw this on a 3x5 card on the refrigerator of my friend, Debbie West, who'd been a very close friend of mine in 4th grade, and I ran into her in Davis, And she had begun practicing Buddhism. She really brought me to Buddhism through our ancient friendship. And I don't know if there is such a thing as reincarnation, but if there is, I've known Debbie West for many lives. And so this quote was on her refrigerator, and I was just recovering from my terrible misadventures in Alaska and kind of feeling beat up by life. And I stood in her kitchen and I read this quote by Dogen, which is, "To have faith means to believe that one is already inherently in the way and not lost, deluded, or upside down, and no increase, no decrease, no mistake." And I was just flooded with gratitude when I read that, because what that meant to me was that nothing in my life had been wasted. None of the crazy things I had done had been for naught. You know, as that little boy said, putting his arm around the other little boy, when you make mistakes, you learn from them. You know, and I realized that all these things that I'd done in my life were just part of my spiritual path. And that in my ignorance, I had indulged in things that were not going to lead to greater ease and happiness. And if I hadn't done that, and done that research to the extent I had, I wouldn't have opened up to Buddhism, you know. I really don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, "It's a beautiful day, I think I'll go practice Buddhism," you know. I think most of us come to practice from a very deep dissatisfaction or disappointment in the world. We come face to face, smack into the truth of impermanence. You know, someone dies, a relationship ends, we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, "I just can't live this way anymore." You know, and it's that deflation at depth which leads us to practice. It's not our great virtue and wisdom. So I just found that quote so helpful. To have faith means to believe that one is already inherently in the way and not lost, deluded, or upside down, and no increase and no decrease and no mistake. So when we truly know that and are kind to ourselves, and we really want greater happiness for ourselves, and we feel we're worth greater happiness. You know, sometimes one of the biggest hindrances is we don't think we deserve happiness. We may have been told that in many ways throughout our lifetime. So then we can open to taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. You know, Buddha as an image of awakening, Dharma as a deep acceptance of life on life's terms, you know, accepting the truth of the way things are, and Sangha, which is aligning ourselves with other people, as you have here today, who want what we want, you know, who can encourage us in going in the direction we want to go in. Suzuki Roshi's widow, Mitsu Suzuki, taught tea ceremony to many people at Zen Center for years and then went back to Japan. She's over 100 years old now. And one of my friends went to visit her recently and said to her, "Okusan, what is the secret of your long life?" And Okusan said, just thought for a moment, she said, "Don't hate anyone, walk every day, and have good conversations." And I quickly wrote that down and put it on my bulletin board. I just thought that was the greatest advice. Don't hate anyone, walk every day, and have good conversations. And a simple prescription for a long and happy life. So, love to hear what my words might have enlivened in you about these hindrances and the antidotes to these hindrances. I'm sure as practitioners you've come across some healing ways of dealing with some of the things that have afflicted you. But I'd like to close with this poem, The Journey, by one of my favorite poets, David White. And this poem has a special resonance for me as a recovering person, but I think it's a poem that might be related to that little bit of hope in the bottom of Pandora's jar. You know, the hope that if we're still alive, if we're still breathing, we can still move forward on the path with the help of our spiritual friends. So the journey. Above the mountains, the geese turn into the light again, painting their black silhouettes on an open sky. Sometimes everything has to be inscribed across the heavens so that you can find the one line already written inside you. Sometimes it takes a great sky to find that first bright and indescribable wedge of freedom in your own heart. Sometimes, with the bones of the black sticks left when the fire has gone out, someone has written something new in the ashes of your life. You are not leaving. Even as the light fades quickly now, you are arriving. So that's from The House of Belonging by David White. And wherever we are right now, our lives have brought us to this intersection with one another. And we're not leaving, we're arriving together. So thank you very much. And I'd love to hear from you now. Yes.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful, wonderful time. And I really appreciate how you started off with the Greek mythology. Because I think when you said metaphors, I think that's exactly what it is. And I think one of the problems with the way people's interpretations of the Bible, I see the Bible as a book of metaphors, not a book of fact. I don't think Jesus walked on water and raised the dead, nor did he have to. I think the stories are there because to teach us, the meaning. And one of the most important ones that I personally like is the one about Lot's wife. Being told, don't look back, you can turn into a pillar of salt or stone, right? And that's just so true in life. Don't look back because you won't move forward and you will be stuck. And that's the message in that. And I think there's so many spiritual messages, and we can see in so many things. And for me, the movie The Wizard of Oz is full of spiritual messages. And it's done in fantasy and it's done in fun and everything, but I think the whole, one after another, I've seen it so many times, it's one of my favorite movies, but it's just the whole thing, even at the end, it's like, you've always had, the power to go home. Mm-hmm. You've always had that, You've gone through all, this journey, but you've always had the power to go home. So anyway, I think we can see that in, child stories, in movies, and the messages that are there, and they're very beautiful. And I think that you're absolutely right about how people who are very angry in life are actually responding to things that happened to them in the past, and that where they didn't stand up for themselves. And I know that's very, very true for me. And I've been able to look at it and catch myself, And I know sometimes when I'm riding my bike and somebody stops in the bike lane, and I want to get really, really upset, and I really realize, I'm not really reacting to this. This is reacting to something in the past, my anger should not come up this much because somebody's holding me apart. I can go around, what I'm saying? Yeah. So, and I'm realizing it's like, it comes from, my childhood, it comes from experiences that I had where I did not stand up for myself, wishing I had. But a lot of those people who were abusive to me are dead now, okay? And I do see this also in cultures and in our society as groups of people who have been, suppressed and have had many wrongs and prejudices against them, and then they come out and they're very angry, and they're angry at people who, who didn't cause that, but they're projecting that, and any little thing could trigger that, violence, and I know I believe it comes from that too. So I just want to thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear you speak. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and thank you for talking about metaphor in that way. I never thought of Lot's wife in that sense. You know what? Something you said about oppressed people, and of course it's totally understandable to get stuck in anger. Sometimes when I'm driving home on 101, there's an African American man who often is on this overpass at rush hour with a big red heart, and he's up there on the overpass dancing and singing, and it makes me feel so good. And I don't know what in his life brought him to want to do that. I thought, oh my goodness, that is so healing. Yeah. And I feel connected to him. I don't know who he is. What a wonderful response to whatever in life brought him to that point. Yeah. And we sometimes forget there are many ways to heal wounds, through art, through music, through communion. So many people who've experienced deep grief then do grief counseling. Certainly in recovery, we redeem the crazy things we did by reaching out to another person, and they can identify with us. So anger is only one response. And I do think that in sitting practice, we open up to many responses to the ways in which we've been harmed. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much, too, for your talk. It brought me to thinking about when I first sit in practice, when I first sit down, and of course my mind is starting to go its usual path in every direction. And it does, recently I saw somebody had said, worry is misuse of imagination. And that really struck me, and I'm keeping that for contemplation for a long time now. But there's a delicate balance, I think, because one of the mind's jobs is to take all it receives from the senses and make up stories about what they're telling us so that we can move through the world successfully. And of course, a lot of that devolves into worry. And so there's this middle ground you have to stand in where you're receiving all your senses information and keep it posited in the here and now rather than let it go off into the job of your mind, which is to, interpret all this and make sure that you're not in danger. It's the oldest part of your brain at work there.
Yeah.
So it's a delicate dance, I think.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's so true. And we would really be in trouble if we didn't listen to our senses when we feel we're in trouble or something dangerous might happen. And certainly planning is a huge part and a very important part of our mind, to anticipate and plan. I don't think we would get very far in our work if we couldn't plan and anticipate. And sometimes when I'm going to go from one place in San Francisco to another, I notice that in my mind I'm picturing myself turning right, going this way. Well, maybe I could go that way. Oh, that's going to be rush hour. In my mind, what a wonderful thing that our mind can do that. Mm-hmm. Of course, we overdo it. But, there's a wonderful book called Why Don't Zebras Get Ulcers? And it's because a zebra will run from danger, and the minute that danger is over, it just stops and starts eating grass. It doesn't keep replaying that traumatic experience over and over again in the mind. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Thank you so much for your talk. I really appreciated the quote about we are already in the path, no need for increase or decrease. And worry and doubt are really the two biggest hindrances for me. Self-doubt and worry about making mistakes, because I had a lot of programming that I wasn't allowed to make mistakes, that I had to be perfect. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me of something a friend told me in my early 20s, which was, you can only know what you know, you make a decision based on that, and then if it's not the best decision, you learn from it and you go on. And after that, I've learned to tell myself there are no wrong decisions. There are just ones that may be a little better or a little worse, and I can learn from them. So that quote really struck a chord with me, and I'm getting ready to transition into a new job, and so I'm going to really use that to help me stay calm and centered.
Yeah, for me that quote is so comforting, because it means that I don't have to throw anything out or second guess myself, that right now I'm okay. And everything I've done right and wrong has led me to this moment. So I'm glad you found that helpful. Yeah.
Would you repeat the quote?
To believe, to have faith means to believe that one is already inherently in the way, and not lost, deluded, or upside down, and no increase and no decrease and no mistake. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Thank you so much. I've never heard someone speak so gently of the 5 hindrances, and which is really beautiful. And I paraphrase, but you said something like, greed is one of those quaint aspects of being human. You know? And, you know, we never think of it like that. But I did want to share, you know, there seem to be so many quotes about worry.
Mm-hmm.
But one that I heard is that worry is interest you pay on a debt that you'll never owe.
That's really good. Interest you pay on a debt that you'll never owe. Thank you. Mm-hmm. You had your hand up? Oh.
Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful talk, full of treasure. If you had 1 minute to suggest to an adult what mindfulness was,
Mm-hmm. Well,
could you make a stab at it?
Yeah, sure. Well, mindfulness is paying attention on purpose right now to what's happening.
Thank you.
And I think sometimes people have the idea that meditation means emptying your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But when we sit, and some of you have spoken evocatively of what comes up for you when you sit, you know, we don't push anything violently away or judge ourselves for having those thoughts. We watch them as they arise, and we gently let them go. And meditation is really coming back to the breath. You know, it's not fruitlessly trying to make your mind an empty slate. And in that moment when you notice what comes up, that's how we get to know ourselves. You know, when I first started sitting, I cried for the first year because I had stuffed my feelings for so many years. And in sitting, it was partly tears of relief that I'm just going to sit down with who I am and just face it. And that's when the healing began. So paying attention on purpose right now to what's going on. Yeah.
Laura, I think we only have about a minute, so I want to take the last question and comment if I may. Thanks again, for everybody else's comments. Mm-hmm. I was also struck by your comments on laziness, you know, that particular hindrance. And, you know, I often hear the people say that when they're on their deathbed, that they wish they had spent less time at the office and more at home. And I think what's going to happen to me is going to be the reverse. I wish I had spent more time at the office. But what I mean by that is I often find myself procrastinating. And I know there's a test to be done. Grading papers is my bugaboo. I'm a teacher. Mm-hmm. And I leave that to the last minute. But, you know, the antidote to that, you know, the energizing yourself to go. In my case, I've discovered fairly recently that if I go to the garden and start pulling weeds for a little bit, I get the energy to then address the other one. So it's really an interesting impediment that it's larger in me than many others. I feel, you know, but it's a recent discovery as to what's behind that.
Yeah.
And part of that, of course, is worry. And the Dogen quote is also pretty useful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed everything you said, and sitting in silence together is very healing in itself. Thank you.
Okay,
I'd like to, can I just dedicate the merit? So if you'll join me in Gasho. We dedicate the merit of our practice here together to all beings in the 10 directions, past, present, and future. May all beings be happy. May they be joyous and live in safety. Thank you.
Well, we still have time for a few announcements. Any announcements? I do know that I wanted to have Jeff talk about our next speaker.
Stuart Swatsky. You could read the bio if you would. I can tell you, Michael and I studied with him in graduate school, and he's the real deal in terms of being a serious practitioner for many years, and he's going to speak. Particularly, he's interested in speaking to us because his focus lately has been on the blend of Tantra and how gay people in particular have sort of a natural ability to marry the feminine and masculine together. So he's looking forward to being with us next week.
And the official blurb we have for him is that he has a degree from CIIS in Princeton. He's lived the inner marriage Kundalini Bhakti Tantra for 40 years and chanted Sanskrit benedictions privately for Janus Dvornish, chair of the unaligned nations of the world, and for Sri Ravi Shankar in India. He's author of Advanced Spiritual Intimacy, which has been endorsed by Robert Thurman and Ken Wilber. In 1977, he received the only federal grant to bring meditation into a juvenile facility. So that should be it. Any other announcements? Yeah.
Hi, I'm your host today. Please stay and enjoy the fellowship of the Sangha. There's a pitcher of cold water and there's some hot butter for tea. If you use a cup, please wash it with hot soapy water. There's some vegan cookies, some of which can charitably be described as limp. Limp. 4-letter word in this class. I'm also the coordinator of hosts, and we have had one host has recently taken a sabbatical, and so we're looking for somebody to volunteer to host once every 2 months, and it's the task is not difficult, and I can go over it with anybody who might be interested in participating. At 12:30, some people gather at the front door and go out to lunch. Anybody is welcome to join them.
Yeah, and also a reminder about that Cass will be passing around Dana Bowl, the Bali word for generosity, and that helps sustain our Sangha, pay the rent, do things like the Larkin Street feeding we do for the youth once a month and other things. So just a reminder. And sorry.
Announcement?
Yeah.
Clint over there strongly believes that it's never too early to start thinking about Thanksgiving. And so he's making me make this announcement today that there will be a GBF annual Thanksgiving Day potluck at my place in El Cerrito. So I'll bring more detailed information to meeting perhaps in November, but just note that there will be another Thanksgiving Day potluck.
And finally, of course, Laura gave us a wonderful dedication of merit. We also have one that we do as part of the tradition, so maybe we can double our merit by doing it.
We need all the merit we can get.
So we hold hands for that one. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, be living in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.